Welcome to the We Are VIP podcast. Each week, your host, Casey Hasten, Director of Recruiting at VIP, will bring you valuable insights from thought leaders, introduce you to incredible companies, and bring you tips for landing your dream job from our team of executive recruiters at VIP. And now, Casey Hasten.
Welcome to the We Are VIP podcast, a podcast devoted to adding value to your career or candidate search, brought to you by VIP. I'm your host, Casey Hasten. I'm an executive recruiter, director of recruiting with VIP, and your all-around hiring guru. And you know, it is my absolute delight to bring you thought leaders that are going to help with your career transformation or even just a life transformation. Remind me to tell you about a conversation we just had. So today on the show, I'd like to welcome Rick Torrison, growth catalyst and author of Born Limitless. Rich brings over 25 years. Rick, I'm so sorry. Why am I saying Rich? Rick brings over...
My name is Richard. You're good. You're good.
Rick brings over 25 years of experience as a transformative leader to his speaking, executive coaching, consulting, and training. He has helped leaders and organizations around the world expand their vision, maximize their potential, grow their people, and leverage their resources for greater impact. I am so excited to welcome you here today, Rick.
I'm excited to be here. This is really cool, Casey. I love what you guys do, and it's an honor to be on this podcast. And hopefully, I can add some value to your listeners and our time together. So I'm really looking forward to it. Thanks for having me.
And you, I mean, we just jumped right in earlier before in the pre-recording. I mean, even the first time we met, it was amazing. But then even in the pre-recording, it's just like you're so easy to open up to, and I'm like going blah all over you. And I mean, I just got coached right before the podcast.
No, here's the thing, when people are teachable and they have a value of learning, conversations are easy because we're always looking for that opportunity to add value to ourselves, to grow, to become better. And what I've learned in our two conversations, and then just in what you guys do at VIP with your commitment to service and value and compassion, the work you guys have done in human trafficking and everything that I've watched and looked at you guys do, I know that you care about adding value, growing yourself and growing others. And so it makes this whole thing real easy. So I'm excited to be here.
It is going to be such an exciting conversation. I mean, I was like, go ahead.
Before we get started, I told you I was going to do this. I know we're going to get into deep stuff, but I want to ask you a question if that's okay. Can I do that like right now before you start asking me questions and we dive in?
The interviewee becomes the interviewer. No, you go right ahead.
Well, this is important because you mentioned I wrote a book called Born Limitless. It's a framework of my coaching, and it's really about mindsets and beliefs that limit us and put ceilings on our lives that keep us from the more that we're created for. So I love to hear this because I've been on, since I've been on the book thing, 30 podcasts in the last 3 months. And so I ask everybody this that lets me, and I've been keeping track of the answers. And it's interesting what most people have said. Here's my question. You have been so successful. You yourself personally, your organization, your compassion, your heart, it's taken a lot of work to get to where you are. And here's the thing that I've realized is all of us struggle with limiting beliefs somewhere in our life. We have these ceilings that we've said we can hear, but I can't hear. And I think it'd be interesting for me because I want to know, it helps me understand, but also maybe your listeners, what limiting belief did you have to overcome or deal with or confront to get you to where you are today, if you don't mind me asking?
I do not mind at all. I actually use this as part of one of my keynote speeches that I do. And back when I was in coaching school, we had to do a visual representation of our gremlin. Okay? Gremlin's that big guy that sits on your shoulder, says, "Don't do it, you're going to get hurt," right? And my gremlin manifested as a Raggedy Ann doll. And that's because I was a redheaded, freckle-faced, awkward little girl. And I was bullied because of that. But, so my gremlin manifested as this Raggedy Ann doll. Her name is Telly. She still sits on my desk today. But every time I would have that doubt, that limiting belief come up, I would create a button and I would put it on her. But the biggest limiting belief, and I'm sure I'm not alone in this, is the fear of not being good enough. And her name, Telly, is short for atelophobia, which is the fear of not being good enough.
Wow. So I'm going to tell you, Of the 25 questions that I've asked this to, 22 have said, I'm not good enough.
Mm.
I just want everyone that's listening, right? Wherever you are, whatever's happening, whatever's going on, I want you to understand something. We all have limiting beliefs, and a lot of it stems from our identity, where somewhere in the line, we believed something that said, you're not good enough. And here's the thing that I think is just real powerful. If you don't mind, just we're kind of jumping in deep, but there's some areas of your life where you are so good enough, you're killing it. And there's other areas of your life where you don't even look at because you have this belief, I'm not good enough here. An example is a coach that I worked with who is multi-million dollar, just successful, houses, car, the whole thing, fifth marriage. He's really good here. Over here, he wasn't. And he just said, this is my life. It's what it's always been. This is how I always get. And he was saying, I want a stable relationship. I want someone to grow old with. He desired that, but he had a belief that said he can't have that. I'm not good enough for that in this area. So I just want your people to hear, and everyone that's listening or might tune in, I know we've all got limiting beliefs. Here's the thing. Those limiting beliefs don't define your destiny. You do. You get to write the story, and you can stand on that limiting belief when you crush it, replace it, and begin to build out a new behavior or construct that takes you to that limitless life you were called to. So anyway, just dropping that in on the front, but thank you for your transparency and sharing that. And that's so powerful and so good. So thank you for that.
Absolutely. And thank you for asking the question. And I think we can end the podcast now. No, I'm kidding.
There you go.
That was so good. It was so good. All of it was so good. And okay, so not everybody knows you like I do. They don't know your greatness. And by the way, I want to say congratulations on hitting the USA Today's best-selling book list with Born Limitless. Can we get a round of applause? Because that's amazing.
It was an amazing experience. Yeah, it feels good. It was a lot of learning. First book, short book. It's, when you write a book, I just knew I was supposed to write a book, and I knew what I wanted to tell in the stories, but you don't know if it's going to be a good book. So I know the content is good. I know the stories are real. I know that there's value, but it's different when you write it down and hand it to someone and I can't live in their living room and go, okay, now when you read that part, here's what I meant. Yes. Oh, and by the way, this is what I was trying to say over here. When it's there, it's done. And it's so humbling because it's the vulnerability trend. So I had some limiting beliefs. And one of my limiting beliefs was because they said, hey, you should go after a best-selling list because that's how you get your message out and you want to reach people. I said, there's no way. I don't have the relationships. I can't do that. I've never written a book before. I'm not really an author. And I started hearing myself say all these things. I'm not, I can't, and I won't. And then I captured myself. Wait, my whole book and my whole life is about changing. I can't, I won't, and I'm never, to I can, I will, and I am. And it begins with the declaration of that belief. And so I wrote down, I don't know if I've got it, I was going to grab it. I don't see it. I've got one of my copies of my book. When I first got my very first copy, no one else had it. They sent it to me. I wrote at the top of it in my pen, scribbled, best-selling author.
Ooh.
I hadn't done anything yet. I hadn't sold a book yet. I just said, okay, I'm going to and I be careful when I say manifest because people have different thoughts on that.
Visualization.
I do believe it. I have a definition of what that looks like, but I wrote it on there. And so I just carried that book. I said, this is what I'm going to believe. And whether I make it or not worried about, but I'm going to go after it and I'm going to believe I can, I will, and I am. And that was the process. And so, yeah, it's cool. It's I feel good about it. Still very humbling to have people reading a book that is personal. There's personal stories in there about my own limiting beliefs and the framework that I use in my coaching. So anyways, it was cool. Thank you for that.
Well, it's a huge accomplishment, and I think that it absolutely deserves to be celebrated. And so, okay, so for those people that don't know you, who are you? What makes you such an awesome coach?
Well, I'm not sure what makes me an awesome coach, except for what I've done is over my life, I have tried to not just learn from the life I've lived, but lead out of that space. And what I mean by that is I'm wired in such a way that you guys are already going to notice, you've already figured it out on this podcast. I don't have any problem communicating, and I'm pretty transparent and I engage. And I've realized I need to be able to live in a real manner with all of the greatness and the craziness and the failures. And I'm going to live out of that place. Right. And so that's been my journey. I was raised by a single mom and a grandma. back in the 60s. I was born in 65. If you do the math, I'm 59. And so I was a latchkey kid before there were latchkeys. The dad left. My birth father left before I was born. I tell the story in my book. I was the fourth child of my mom. She had two that she had abortions in the early 60s. The third one she gave up for adoption. And then I was the one she chose to keep. And then when she said, I'm keeping this child, he left. Right. And so then it was just me and my mom in the mid 60s. And you don't go home and say, I'm not married. You don't say you have a kid out of wedlock. So there was a shame and guilt that I was raised in. And she was an amazing mom and worked hard to provide for me. But it created some mindsets and beliefs in my life that I didn't realize as I was growing up and living my life. And, I had to overcome those things. And so I'm just really sharing what I've learned. And I hope that it becomes a tool and a value add to someone else, where they can realize, man, these are some terrible situations, but they don't have to define me. Right. And, that's really my hope in the message.
Well, and I think that's very true. And I think I experienced something not quite as dramatic as what you did, but, growing up a redhead, there's not many redheads out there, right? And kids are mean. Kids are really mean. And I formed a lot of my beliefs based on the fact that I was so bullied that I could never stand up for myself, that I couldn't do those things, that I wouldn't ever be able, I wasn't the cheerleader. I wasn't any of those things because I wasn't the perfect profile, right? And so those caused a lot of limiting beliefs that I still struggle with today. Some of the buttons on my poor little telly, insecure, fearful, what was the other one? Too aggressive. Because I think that too aggressive is like the counterbalance to not being aggressive enough, right? And so those are things I have to deal with. Now, you've had some formal training as well, though, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I had a psychology degree. I've got a master's. I've got a honorary doctorate, but it's still a doctorate in community transformation and coaching and leadership. And then I've worked with John Maxwell, been with him for about 10 years. And so he's mentored and lived in my life and spoken value. He says what you said about, being people of value, right? His statement is, I want to be a person of value surrounded by people of value who are offering value every day. Right. And I'm like, man, that's how I want to live. I want to be that person, and so he was one. I've got some certifications and other stuff, but really my greatest thing is life. There's something that time and life experiences that's the only way you get certain things. And I try to tell younger people that. I said, man, it's not that you're not smart, you don't have wisdom, you're not capable. I said, there's just some things that we only get through time and through the challenges of life and moving through those, right? That we can only get in those experiences. No book can take you through that. You just have to walk through it.
But right? I think it does help to have coaches and mentors in your life to help collapse that timeline to success too. So I think
I've got a coach for 30 years. He just passed away. He transitioned in my life over our journey together, but it was probably 25 years before he passed away. And if it wasn't for him and the posture he took in my life and my marriage, I don't think I think I might be the person I am today, but the road that would have taken me to get here, I don't know what the cost would have been. He helped me mitigate that by the way he challenged me. And the reality is, I will tell any of your people that are thinking about coaching or getting into, you've got to be willing to be challenged. You don't have to agree with everything they say, but you've got to be teachable. That's the first thing he said. He said, I'll coach you. I'll work with you as long as you're teachable. You don't have to agree with me. You don't have to do what I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'm not your Holy Spirit. That's kind of what he said, but I will tell you what I think. And then you're free to decide what you want to do. I'll give you my thoughts, but I'm not going to judge you. You are free to act. And then we'll talk about what you learn as you go through it. And man, that experience was so powerful and freeing to walk through life, and risk a little bit, knowing that there was a safe place to process that.
That is the definition of a true coach right there. I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'll be your accountability partner, but you know what's best for you. I'm just here to help guide
he really
you.
Set the tone. He modeled for me really well how to care unconditionally without anything to gain. He didn't have anything to gain from me. It wasn't something he needed from me. He was at the point in his life where he just said, which is where I'm at in my life now. He just wanted to help empower others, to be able to be the best that they were called, born, and created for. Right. And to do that, we've got to realize we've got some limiting beliefs that have put ceilings on our lives that are causing us to settle for something less than we were born and created for. And the problem with that is we hold these beliefs for so long, we don't even realize we have them. We start calling them normal.
Yes.
One of the first questions I ask the people in my coaching relationship is, what if the normal that you're holding over your life isn't normal? What if it's not? Are you willing to examine what you call normal? Well, this is how my life's always been. This is just how it always works out. This is what I get. I'm just never this. And you've created that normal. You've created an identity that has limited you. Now, you may ask that question and realize, yes, this is normal. And this is okay. But what if you ask that question and you realize the normal you're believing is actually a lie?
That can probably really destroy some people's psyche. They're like, I've been living under this for so long. And I know, when I went through coaching school, that was a lot of what we were taught, is to break down those limiting beliefs, break down those norms, build new norms, be able to, they really gave us permission, which is what I think a good coach does, to explore outside of what you've been taught your entire life, those beliefs that you've internalized, but may not necessarily be true.
You just hit it, right? I have a framework in my book, and the book's really about this framework. And it's not something I created. It's something I have communicated that I think exists, and we all know it exists. We just aren't aware of it. So I bring it to the awareness, and it's this. I believe that all of the outcomes we get in our life, good and bad, so it's a neutral thread, all of our outcomes, good and bad, are a result of a behavior, actions. I mean, everything we do has a result. It creates a fruit or whatever. So all outcomes are tied to actions or behaviors. All of our behaviors, every action that we do comes from a belief. We may not consciously think about it, but we believe something, so we act in a certain way, right? And so every behavior stems from a belief that gives us our outcomes. Now, in typical psychology world, and I have a degree in that, right? We go, okay, I don't like my outcomes. What do I need to do? And we talk about behavior modification, right? We change our behaviors, change our systems, work harder, add a new this, do this differently, right? And the challenge that I found in 25 years of living in this space that really awakened me as I was running in these circles, going around the mountain, not up it, was we kept cycling back. Like, okay, I change all my behaviors. I do this differently. I get this system. I do this process, whatever it is. But we often, almost 100% of the time, I won't say 100, but we end up back where we were or somewhere worse because we've never addressed where the behavior came from. The behavior came from a belief. So we have to change our behaviors to get different outcomes. That's absolutely true. But if we don't understand the belief that drives the behavior and reassess that belief, the chance of sustaining a behavior change over time is very minimal. I can will myself to do something differently for a while, but then the unexpected happens. I get punched in the gut, some stress happens, life happens, and I revert back to what I believe. So we go back to that place, and then we just reinforce the fact that I can't, I'm not, and I'm never. Because we never address the belief that drives the behavior. Does that make sense? There's one more piece to it I'll share in a minute, but does that make sense? I mean, I just want to let that soak in for a minute.
That makes total sense. And I have a question before we move to the next piece. Yeah. What is one of the most common beliefs that you deal with when engaging with people and coaching for the first time?
Yeah, well, it's what we said at the beginning. It's typically around identity that says I'm not good enough.
Gotcha.
We devalue ourselves, and it's typically stems from what someone else said, what something happened to us, trauma in our life, an experience, something where we failed, or someone we trust or look up to said something, either intentionally or unintentionally, that we grabbed a hold of that said we can't, we won't, or we'll never. And we maybe say it offhand, right? Oh, I'm not good at that. I'll never do this.
I will tell you, there was an incident in my life that I can point back to now that we're talking about this, where I can tell you exactly where part of that limiting belief came in. And it was an elder in my life, a family member that did not, and I was probably 8 or 9 at the time, and it crushed my soul when she said this. She said, "Oh, honey, you're not pretty enough to be a cheerleader."
Okay.
That's what I heard.
Yep. 100%.
I'm not sure that that's what, and it took us probably 10 years for us to get to a point where I finally told her why I wouldn't talk to her.
Yeah.
And she wrote me the longest letter saying, "But that's not what I said." And I'm like, "But that's what I heard."
Right.
So,
And perception is reality to the person that holds it, right? It may not be true, but if I perceive it, then it's my reality. So let me give you the other piece. So if I was coaching you through, let's say we just uncovered that, right? So if I was coaching you and we were talking about this, and I want everyone to, you can do this with yourself, right? So here's where our beliefs come from. Okay. And this is really important. You had an experience where something happened when you were young, correct? Right?
Correct.
You just explained you perceived someone said something to you. Something happened. The issue wasn't what was said or what happened. That doesn't create a limiting belief. The limiting belief comes from how you define or interpret that experience. So she did something, said something unintentional, whatever. She said something. You perceived it and then defined it. You interpreted that experience to say, oh, what she's really saying or what she said was, I'm not pretty enough.
Yep.
Right? I'm not like everybody else. I'm not in the model that I should be. I don't fit the bill. You started to internally, unconsciously, playing a tape in your head. You're interpreting what happened. You're now creating a construct. That construct came from so emotions happen first. So let's say if I was you hear this, the emotion comes up. The emotion is like, oh, that doesn't feel good. And from the emotion comes a feeling. From the feeling, so the feeling is the outworking of the emotion, the external process of the emotion. I have now the feeling. And now you're going inside. Internally, what we do is, what do I do with this feeling? How do I define it? How do I justify it? How do I live with it? How do I get rid of it? What do I do with this emotion, this feeling I have? So what do? We begin to define it, justify it, agree with it, whatever we do to be able to process that feeling that came from the emotion from the encounter. Now, here's the powerful part. When I do that, that interpretation becomes a belief. Oh, I must not be. We wouldn't say it out loud, but we begin to believe. That must be true. We'll look at, now I can now that I've put that in my sight as I'm not pretty enough or I'm not whatever, we start building this whole process or place of reinforcing it. So we start finding things that reinforce that belief. It's like the car. Hey, I want to buy a green Mercedes. You see it everywhere because it's in your consciousness. So if you say I'm not good enough, right?
Yep.
You start seeing and engaging the world that reinforces I'm not good enough. So what happens? I start believing I'm not good enough or I'm not pretty enough. Remember what I said. What happens when you're with your belief? Every belief demands a behavior. Every belief has an outworking of action, and our behaviors will never go against our belief. They'll never go against the belief. You cannot act in a way that you don't believe. Now, you can will yourself to be different, but if you don't change the belief, you end up back acting in the way that supports the belief. We're created in a way to make sure that our behaviors reinforce what we say we believe. So then your whole life from that point on, your behaviors started to reflect, I'm not pretty, or I'm not good enough, or I'm not this. You don't even know you're doing it. But your subconscious has to agree with what you believe. So it starts manifesting that reality. Hey, boss says I'm not pretty. So let's act in a way that says we're not pretty.
Can I tell you something?
Real quick, that behavior gets an outcome. And now we live our lives 25 years later, and we've got all this wake of junk and trauma and brokenness. Like, why is this happening? Because we believed it to be true. And so now we're getting the fruit of that. Does that make sense? That's the framework, right?
Yes.
How we interpret experiences drive our beliefs. Our beliefs drive our behaviors get outcomes. That's just a truth. It's not something I created and went, oh, let me just, No, that's always been how life is. Now they interplay and go back and forth, but that's the through line.
That is so good. And it's so interesting that you say that, because I'm thinking back to like high school and stuff like that, being told you're not pretty enough in my head, right? And I would seek out activities where I didn't have to be pretty. In fact,
Yes.
so one thing I did was I raced dirt bikes. I did cross country. I was in the mud. I would get off, I'd take my helmet off, I'd be covered in mud from head to toe. And I was okay with that,
Yep.
you know? And now that you say that, I believe maybe I would have done that anyway, but I believe I was probably more attracted to that sport
100%. There's no
because
doubt.
of that.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I would
Interesting.
absolutely say, and if you start digging, there'll be a lot of things: relationships, boys, how you present yourself, school, dances, expectations, images. We'll divert. We'll move somewhere else. We'll make excuses. We will minimize ourselves. We'll say something to preempt it, right? With somebody that we're interested in, but we'll just go ahead and say it sarcastically. Oh yeah, but I'm not that pretty that I couldn't be one of those cheerleaders because I'm just not as pretty as all them. And we laugh. And we do it to deflect what this belief is that we have before someone else says it.
Wow, that was, and I mean, it's been a long time since I've been in high school, so obviously that still bothers me. But
Well, you just reinforced how powerful this process is.
yes,
So we're seeing in our lives. So this is the deal I would tell people. If we're stuck in a place or we can't seem to break through, or we're cycling in a place, we're like, why do I keep cycling here? Typically it's because you got a belief that won't let you break through. That belief has become a ceiling in your life in that area. And so now you're letting your past be the lenses by which you view your future. And so now your past is defining your future. But your past was never meant to define your future, it was meant to refine it, right? And inform it. So when we can clean our lenses, we can see our future clearly. But here's the thing, my glasses are so scarred from my past that I can't see my future clearly. So I settle for something less than. And I don't even know I'm settling.
that
We all live there, and we don't have to. There's freedom to actually grow beyond and break through that ceiling if we're willing to ask some hard questions, challenge our normal, and not judge ourselves or criticize or condemn ourselves, but say, listen. So here's what I would say. Let's go back to real quick. Let's go back to that situation where she said that. If I was talking to you, this isn't counseling on the couch therapy. I would say, listen, in that experience, when that happened and you had that perception, was your perception that you created, how you created the narrative around that, was it a truth or a lie? Looking back on it, was what you started to tell yourself about what you heard, was it true about yourself? Are you
um
really ugly?
I mean, at
No,
the time I
go.
did believe it.
No, you didn't. You didn't start believing it. You created the belief over time, ruminating in your head. I'm asking you, was it true? Were you ugly? No, don't hesitate. Were you ugly? See, here's an issue. You haven't gotten free yet. Were you ugly?
Yes.
No, you were not. Because
But
then you're saying the one who created you, designed you, created something ugly and imperfect, and he didn't. Your red hair and your freckles were perfect. It was exactly what it was supposed to be. But you let the definition of yourself become filtered by the world's view of pretty, not the one who knit you together in her mother's womb. Now I went into a faith world there because that's where I live in.
right.
But that's what drives me. So even if without faith, I would tell you, listen, you weren't ugly. You said you were ugly based on what other people say and the standard was. Who gets to set that? Not you, not them. So there was a lie. You were not ugly. You were just, whoa.
He's getting excited.
All right, I got passionate. You guys can tell I get worked up. I just want you to understand. I want people to hear this. You believed a lie. So I would go, the truth is, were you ugly? Now I'm going to ask you again, were you really ugly?
No.
No, you were not. So what's the truth? Tell me what the truth is. Replace that narrative with a new one. What's the truth?
The truth is and was, I was very uniquely
Yes.
knitted to be
Yes.
Casey.
Yes. You are uniquely you. You were beautiful in all that you were, in your uniqueness. There was no one like you. You were meant to be perfect just as you were. The red hair was a gift. The freckles were unique. It wasn't odd or different or broken or wrong or a mistake. So when you start reframing the narrative, what do? You start reframing the belief.
Yep.
You're replacing the lie with a truth. And now, once you start declaring the truth, I am beautiful, I am capable, I am uniquely made, there's no one like me. If you start declaring that, reframing it, what's got to happen? What did I say about your beliefs? When you change your belief, what has to happen?
Your behavior has to change.
Behavior has to match the belief. So now what would your life look like if that's the mantra you start saying? I'm beautiful, I'm capable, I'm smart, I'm uniquely created, I have great capacity. The behavior, your subconscious has to go, hey, the boss just said we're beautiful, we're amazing, we're created well. It's going to start acting in a way that supports that belief.
I feel better
It has
already.
to. It has to.
It has to. I love that.
It has to. There's no brokenness.
I love conversations like this, and and I do let myself be very vulnerable. I usually put myself out there as an example on this podcast, and I don't mind at all. And I love the sessions that I get to have with people like you. And I think this is a really good point to bring up, because as much as I believe, I've done so much coaching, I've done so much, I've never talked about that before. And that is such a limiting belief that even though I fixed all the other stuff and put pretty little flowers all over it and butterflies, that's going to change a lot for me, just having that one little breakthrough. So thank you for that.
It changes everything. And I want you, this is not hard. It's simple, but it's not easy. Isn't that what they say?
Yes.
This is a simple construct. It's not rocket science. It's not easy because we've held this thought for so long that we don't even think about it. And we just naturally live in this limited space. And so what I love to do is help people clean their glasses. If you wear glasses and they get dirty, it's like we clean them and then we put them back on. I'm like, wow, I didn't realize how dirty my glasses were. I can see again. That's the same thing with our belief system. If my hands are my lenses, I can see you, you're there, and I can get used to this, but it's not clear. But when I clear my glasses, man, there you are. That's amazing. And now I can see my future and the possibility without the scars of my past.
So important. I do want to bring up, and I love this. This is not the direction I had intended for this podcast, but that's what makes it so good.
I just started going.
No, I love it. I love it. But you wrote an article recently that I have here with me that I really liked, and I think it kind of sums up a lot of what you're talking about right now. But it's the title was, "What Does a Limitless Life Look Like?" Tell people how to just give them a real good overview of this article really quickly, and then tell them how they can find this and sign up for your newsletter, because it's just incredible information.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. And I have to be honest, I have a great assistant that helps me write the articles, and we talk through stuff, and he helps take the information that I'm putting out and then puts it in a format. So I just want to be clear on that. But on LinkedIn is where I have my newsletter, and I have a bunch of them in there. We try to put them out a couple a month. They're real short. My passion in everything I do is if I'm going to do something, I want to add value. No one needs more information. No one's saying, hey, I don't have enough knowledge, give me more, right? Our problem isn't information. Our problem is we're not acting on the information we have. So if I'm going to put out more information, if I'm going to give you content, I want to make sure that content has value, and two, is practical, that you can actually engage, do, or touch. You can put it into work immediately, right? So there's value for you right now if it's something you want to grab a hold of. Otherwise, it's just I'm filling my head with stuff that actually isn't serving me. So that's my heart behind the newsletters, is there's practical takeaways. They're short and simple. So this one was, what would my life look like without limiting beliefs or self-imposed limits? Right. And I think that's a great question. That's kind of what I propose in there as we look at this idea of a limitless life. What would that look like? Like, if I truly believe that I could do X, how would my life be different today because I believe that? And that causes me to think about my actions, my behaviors, my relationships, my values. I have to look at those. Man, I probably wouldn't have this relationship. I probably wouldn't be pursuing this career. I probably would, whatever. If I actually believe that, would my life look different today that would reflect that belief? And if not, what would I need to change to do that? So this is challenging us to look at that. And one of the ways we talk about that in the article is a limitless life looks like a life that's lived on purpose, with purpose and passion. Right. And so that my 2 words for this year, I do words every year. And this year I had 2 words. My 2 words for this year was design and intention, because I'm all over the place. You guys can already tell. I mean, I can chase rabbits. I'm that dog in Up. Man, the squirrel comes by and I'm like, squirrel, and we are gone. So I know that if I want to be productive, I need to live with more intention by design. So intention is thought about, this is where I want to go, this is what I'm doing, and the design is the strategy to get there. And so I have to be very clear about that. And so the process of this limitless life of pursuing this is I need to understand what those things are. What is my passion that I need to pursue, right? It's about embracing growth. It's a mindset that says, I want to grow. That's what a limitless life looks like. You can't be limitless if you put a ceiling on yourself and said, I either know it all, or I can't know it all, or I don't know enough, or I'm not interested in that. So you have to have this mindset that says, man, I'm going to grow through everything, right? A lot of times we go to instead of go through. So we feel like our life is going to this moment, and then we sit in that pit, that mess, that mire, and we think that's the end of our story. But what if the mindset says, I'm not going to this, I'm going through this? And just that shift, I'm going through it, means there's something on the other side. I'm not stuck here. This doesn't have to be my story, right? The other thing is we've got to realize fear is normal, and it's an emotion that we were given, and it's not a bad thing. Fears are true and real. They are part of our lives. We experience them all the time. The fear isn't the issue. The fact is that we allow fear to overwhelm us and then drive us to react and do stuff. So fear becomes a limiting gate or fence that keeps us from experiencing what we could experience, because we've believed the fear is more powerful than the freedom. And so now fear becomes our freedom, because we've limited it. So, because what we've done is we have to justify why we're living in this limited state, because that otherwise we couldn't live there. We wouldn't feel good. We have to be able to justify why we're settling for less.
Yep.
And so that fear becomes that limitation keeping us from our freedom. The other thing is we don't do a good job setting goals. Casey, we have these ethereal destinations. I tell people, is in another article I wrote, that I live in Houston, Texas. Houston, Texas has Mexican restaurants. I love Mexican restaurants. In your GPS, if you want to go to the best Mexican restaurant in Houston, you can't put in best Mexican restaurant. There's over 4,000 Mexican restaurants. I'm lost. I'd never get there. Right. I have to put an address, a name. I have to have my destination be specific, that goal, that desire, where I'm headed. If it's generic, I'm going to spin my wheels and chase a lot of things and get distracted. If it's specific, I can then create a roadmap to get there. And so a lot of us haven't really clarified that destination, that goal, that objective that we want, whether it's a lifetime one or something by the end of the week. And so we have these ethereal destinations, and we don't ever know if we've really arrived. And so we're just striving all the time. Then the last thing I would tell you with all that, it's all about relationships, connections. Me connecting with you, the synergy that we've had in our conversations, that connection relationship is empowering, right? So now how do we leverage each other? How do we encourage each other? How can we live in context? Because we both want to grow. We both want to add value. So now I'm leveling up my life because I've got you in it. So the connections that we have, but it's true. We need to realize that the connections, the relationships we have are so powerful. They will either propel us or they're going to slow us, and they're going to pull us backwards. And so that's, we've got to recognize that sometimes I've got to let go of the good to get to the great. And that might be a relationship. So those are when I think about what a limitless life looks like, that's kind of some of the dynamics that I think we've got to begin to embrace. Does that make sense? Is that what you were asking?
That's exactly what I was asking and more. That was beautiful. How do people get in touch with you? I mean, I know they're probably going to want to hire you as a coach, but definitely read your book. So give us all the good stuff.
Yeah. So I would tell people the easiest way to get into my world is to connect with me on Instagram. That's just kind of where I've got a lot of stuff that's happening. You can learn about me. There's a lot of stuff that goes on there, and it's at Rick Torrison. I know you'll put it in the show notes. Yep. It's my name, but connect with me on Instagram. And then I would encourage you, direct message me on Instagram and let me know what a limiting belief is. I will send you a 1-page construct of how you can begin to deal with and overcome that limiting belief. If you just say, hey, Rick, I heard you on this. I wrestle with, I'm not good enough. Right? I will send you kind of the framework, just a simple deal for free, just to give it to you, to help you begin to work through and break through that limiting belief. So Instagram would be the great place. I have a private Facebook group as well, but start there, connect with me. I'll get you involved in that private Facebook group. Let me know if there's any way I can serve you. So I do coaching, group coaching, and I do a lot of communication leadership training. That's my heart, and then speaking. But yeah, easy, simple Instagram. Find me there, connect with me there. Text me there, message me there. I'll respond. We'll get connected.
That is
amazing. And then you get my book on any platform. So the book, Born Limitless, 100 pages. It's just that one framework about our beliefs and my story. And you can get that on any of the platforms, Amazon, Books A Million, Barnes and Noble, anywhere you want. It's there. And so feel free to grab it. And then let me know if you read it. Let me know your thoughts. I'm learning about that whole process.
Well, I love that, and I do hope our readers will take advantage of that offer, because if the only step you take in coaching is learning how to overcome your limiting beliefs, that's going to get you so far in your career, in life, and everything else. And Rick, I so appreciate you being here today, and I just have one last thing to say to you. You are a VIP.
Well, thank you. Woo-hoo! I'll take it. And I got one last thing to say to you. You were born limitless.
And that's a wrap for today. Join us next week here on the We Are VIP podcast. We'd love to know how we can help you be a VIP. To find out more, log on to wearevip.com.